Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Women in Digital event. I would now like to turn the floor over to your first speaker, Lynn Brady, Global Alliance Director. Lynn, you now have the floor.
Great, thank you, Anu. Hello, and welcome to our annual Women in Digital event. We are excited to be hosting this on International Women's Day. I'm Lynn Brady. I'm our Global Alliance Director of our Adobe partnership at Perficient. I'm currently in Cincinnati, Ohio today. This event started in 2017 at Adobe Summit with 20 ladies around a conference table sharing their own stories and journeys of navigating being a woman in the digital space. In 2018 and 19, the event evolved into a panel discussion and breakfast to standing room only crowds at Adobe Summit. In 2020, as the world went virtual, so did we, hosting a virtual breakfast and panel discussion. Over the years, we've had the honor of having female leaders from well-known brands as our panelists: GM Financial, Ford, Kaiser, Cedars-Sinai, Cardinal Health, Waste Management, Microsoft, Quest Diagnostic, Dish Network, and our own special annual guest, Adobe's own Lonnie Stark. Last October, we added a philanthropic component donating to Pink Ribbon Girls and the Morgan Pressel Foundation in honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Today, Adobe and Proficient will be donating on your behalf to Girls Who Code. May we all be part of raising the next generations of women in digital. I would like to introduce you to today's moderator, Kim Williams Chipak. Kim is a director in our global strategy and architecture practice at Proficient and is the co-host of Proficience Podcast, What If, So What? Kim, take it away.
Thank you so much, Lynn, and welcome to all of our attendees today. We have a dynamic and insightful conversation planned thanks to our panelists. Without any further delay, I'll invite you all to join me on camera now. Good morning. All right, welcome to our panel this morning. To get the conversation going, I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourself: name, role, company, title, and most importantly, where you are in the world today. And to help us get to know you even better, tell us what book, TV show, movie, or podcast has your full attention right now, either professionally or just for fun. Lonnie, let's start with you.
Hi, welcome everyone. So I am Lonnie Stark, Vice President of Strategy and Product for two of the product lines for Adobe Experience Cloud, Experience Manager and Adobe Commerce. And I am coming to you all the way from San Jose, California. And as far as the books or things I'm reading, two things. So I'm reading a book called The Mirror and the Palette, Rebellion, Revolution, Resilience in 500 Years of Women's Self-Portraits. So I think that title tells you about what that book is about. I paint as a hobby, so it's something I'm interested in. And the other area is I've been studying a little on the neurobiology of emotion, because I really like the breakdown of subjective emotion with the science of the brain. So those are the two areas I've been exploring.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Lonnie. Laura, how about you?
Hi, I'm Laura Hawkins, and I am a product ownership manager at Enterprise Holdings, and my team oversees our daily rental websites. I am sitting near St. Louis, Missouri today. That's where our headquarters is located. And on a personal note, I'm going to talk about, I love to read. So most of the time I'm reading for enjoyment. And right now I decided to go into deep into my to be read. I have a long list of books I love to want to read and have put it off for a while. But with the movie coming out, I'm now reading Dune. So I'm immersing myself in Dune. It's kind of a hardcore book. I usually read light and fluffy, fast books. So I'm really enjoying it, and I wanted to be able to read it before the next two movies come out. So that's me.
Very nice. Good advice, too. Tanya, how about you?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Tanya Infantino. I'm the National Vice President in the Digital and Human Experience space for Common Spirit Health. My focus is in that digital patient experience. So how do we bring people to discover, access, engage, and stay loyal to our brand? Very exciting work. I'm really happy to be touching the patients. And I'm here in Scottsdale, Arizona. My focus, I'm actually revisiting an oldie but goodie, Multipliers by Liz Wiseman. It's in a nutshell, it categorizes people into two areas, and it's never black and white, but to diminishers and multipliers. Diminishers essentially squash performance and outcomes, while multipliers bring out the genius in the people around them. So this book is great to guide you through both how to be aware of when you're modeling diminisher behavior, as well as tips on how to focus on, really bringing out that genius in people and which leads to better solutions, leads to higher morale, etc. My scientific mind can't stop. So the other book that I'm reading is The Code Breaker. And if you haven't picked it up and you do have a science mind, it's fascinating. It's about the science that led up to the COVID vaccinations. Decades of work.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tanya. Nina.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Nina Huskin. I'm very excited to be on the panel today, so thank you very much for having me. I'm the Senior Manager of Electrify Home and E-commerce, so that's the home charging business unit at Electrify America. I'm personally quite interested in environmental matters, so the movie that has caught my attention these days is called Seaspiracy. It's a documentary. Available on Netflix. I would encourage everybody to check it out. It is investigating the international fishing industry and its impact on the world's oceans. So a little bit more serious, but really a must-see if you care about environmental matters.
That's great. Thank you for that, Nina. Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Trelakis. I'm a senior software engineering manager at Caterpillar. I'm coming to you from Peoria, Illinois, and a book I'm reading right now that has been pretty powerful for me is actually called The Power of Regret by Dan Pink. And what he teaches in that book is regret is really seen as a negative emotion, and a lot of people more try to suppress regrets in their life, but it can be a powerful teacher and help you to grow in your life. And so I really like the insight that he provides in that book.
That's great. Thank you for everyone's intros. And I am now personally inspired to go read and watch everything that everyone talked about. And hopefully, if you've exhausted your personal reading, watching, listening library, you've gotten some inspiration. So thank you so much for that. Let's move on to some of our topics of a more professional development nature. Nina and Laura, my first question is for you two. What's your top professional goal for 2022, and what strategies are you using to achieve it? Nina, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, I'm responsible for the home charging business at Electrify America. So last year, very exciting for us, we introduced our new home charger via our e-commerce platform on both the US and Canada. So it was really the heart of the sales success that we encountered last year. So looking ahead to 2022, we're really excited to build on that foundation we created and work with some of our business partners to really expand our B2C and B2B channels a lot more. For example, to work with our partners and see how we potentially can integrate the e-commerce platform deeper into their sales funnel and really drive the sales opportunities further that way. So it's really critical, but also exciting year for us, and we look forward to really make use of the e-commerce platform.
Yeah, it's been fantastic to see you launch, going from 0 to 100, no pun intended, but it's been really exciting to watch that industry grow. Laura, what about you?
Yeah, so for my professional development goal this year, focusing on leadership of my team. Last year, I had a couple new employees and was really focused on more of the training and onboarding. And this year, just trying to get out of the way and letting my team shine, looking for opportunities for helping them to grow, making sure that I'm not in every meeting so that I'm not the voice that people are hearing, but giving them opportunities to step forward and be the face and the leadership and the projects they're working on. And that also then frees me up to be more strategic in how can I clear out obstacles for them and work with them in strategies for solving problems on their own. So really focusing more on the leadership and management of my team. I have an amazing team, love them, and I know some of them are on today. So great job, guys, love you.
That's so important for leaders to like that, get out of the way so that your team can do their thing. That's fantastic. Changing gears a little bit. So business strategies really have had to change significantly and quickly as of late, as all of you know. Some strategies that we're seeing out there in the market are pretty experimental, but could have a pretty large payoff. Tanya and Lonnie, I'm going to start with you on this. How have you successfully gained support, visibility, and in turn credibility for innovation in digital when selling these big ideas internally? Tanya, let's start with you.
Absolutely. You really need to be focusing on business outcomes as well as ongoing networking, right? So it needs to be relevant, and you need your people. So I'll break that down into those two. So when it comes to outcomes, the business problem needs to be something that the organization is trying to solve. You need a clear definition of success and a way to measure it that's defined collectively with your business partners. So many times in tech, we want to do cool things, but we fail to understand that we need to spend just as much time with our operations, our business, our marketing, all of the other areas in the organization, and in our case, the clinical teams, just as much time there as in tech. Make sure those partnerships are tight, and then also be thinking about scale. Is this even scalable? When it comes to networking, you need to find your influencers. They come in all roles and titles, and they're spread throughout. Making sure that you pick up the phone and create those authentic human connections. And then whenever you need to really form a partnership with someone that you haven't worked with before, I guarantee that if you're working on your networking, you can find someone that will get you in with that face-to-face that you can then form that authentic human connection. So the other thing I would say is get involved with opportunities far and wide. You never know. Just like today on this panel, Lonnie, Laura, Nina, Liz, Kimberly, and Stephanie, I'm sure our paths will cross sometime in the future, and we'll look back on this day. So those two things, outcomes and networking.
That's great. And authenticity, that seems to be a common theme in a lot of discussions as of late. So I think, agreed, that's really important. Lonnie, what about you?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Tanya just sort of framed up. I would say the only things I would add to it is what's exciting about the area of innovating in digital is there's so much unknown. So part of this is, with the big idea is being able to test out how to break down that big idea into smaller chunks so that you can test and learn and to build support that way as well. I remember 10 years ago, where a big idea was, here's a plan for the next 3 years, and we're going to execute it. And then in 3 years, we're going to have this big bang sort of execution, then we'll figure out if it works. That doesn't happen anymore because we don't know enough to know what's going to happen in 3 years. What we want to do is figure out what directionally is a way to go, and then have smaller goals to be able to test and learn. I think some of the measurable success criteria that Tanya mentioned. An example of that I see when it comes to what Tanya mentioned about business outcomes versus technology is I remember when augmented reality first came out and everybody thought it was really cool and it was like sexy technology. But it was a technology looking for a problem to solve. And I think the first big application of it I remember was Pokemon Go, yes. Where that was a game. And I think some of you remember, I remember my sister introduced me to it. And now what I'm seeing is a second wave where I'm seeing augmented reality, but it's in the context of business problems. So I was talking to a medical device company, and they were talking about using augmented reality to help better repair their products in situations and do training. I've also seen with a DIY company that they are using augmented reality as a way for people to envision what a particular home improvement project would look like in their homes. And so those are times when I think about that importance of not only the shiny new toy of technology, but how it drives to a business outcome that really delivers on customer value. And if you have those pieces in place and you're able to then set up direction, but also let's test it out, let's pilot it, those are the ways you start to build that support. Because ideas are cheap. I hate to say it, but ideas are cheap unless you're able to show success with it. And as you get more successes, it tracks others in the organization and starts to build the idea. And finally, when you do that, it means that by the time you're ready to scale, you're not the only one talking about the idea. Everyone else is starting to see the success from the early stages to help you be able to scale.
That's great. That's great advice. I'm wondering, though, kind of the flip side and the more difficult challenge of the big ideas. Liz and Laura, how have you handled challenges of this won't work or it's too risky from within your company or team? Like you can't even get to that point where you're demonstrating success. Liz, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think during the pandemic, we had a lot of different challenges that occurred. And one of those, not only with our business strategies, but also just in how we work. And so for example, I had team members that wanted to work remotely. Before the pandemic even started, they wanted to work from home. And I have a lot of developers on my team. My team does all the design, development, and support of digital marketing and e-commerce applications at Caterpillar. And they felt like they could be more productive if they were heads down, focused on their code rather than, getting interrupted by meetings or other office disruptions. And so there's people that were threatened by that type of change that could occur, that said, how do you manage employees when you don't see them every day? And how can you trust that they're working and that they're being productive if they're not in the office? And then really the pandemic hit and we had to quickly learn to pivot and to this fully remote workforce. And so now 2 years later, we can confidently say that working remotely has been productive. We've achieved challenging goals and we've not had to be physically in the office. And I think that as we start to move back into the office, that way of working is going to continue to get tested, and our employees are still going to desire to work remotely and don't necessarily see the value of the physical office space. And so the way that I'm going to handle that is really support my employees and advocate for their need to have that flexible work, and then still be able to achieve those challenging objectives as we move forward.
Yeah. Much like a lot of organizations, the pandemic served as sort of a catalyst for change, whether we liked it or not. And a lot of it, there was success in a lot of areas there. Lori, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely have seen changes to the way things are done since COVID. I kind of took it back when I was hearing that question to what Tanya and Lonnie were saying is when features or initiatives kind of appear to be risky or different than we've done before, is to really break it down to really understanding the objective. Do you understand the objective? Break it down to pieces. What are you trying to achieve in each of those pieces? And then look at, have we tested it? Do we know what our customers want? Do we know how we want to present it to our customers? And understanding all those pieces so you can address them and make sure that you have a plan in place for them. We've also kind of addressed it, like Lonnie said, is piloting or a smaller launch. Is like, how are we going to launch this feature? If we know what we want to accomplish in each of those phases or in pieces, can we do it in short term, temporarily, in a different way? Do we know what it would take to do it eventually, the long term kind of the ideal approach? Is there a way to do it short term so we can test and we can iterate and have those learnings? And then I think finally I was thinking of like risk mitigation. So, and you could have a smaller pilot group. You could launch at pilot locations. If you have many locations like we do, you could just go to a targeted audience. On our websites, we can also throttle traffic. So if we have reporting in place, we can monitor that and then launch it to a smaller percentage of our audience until we're comfortable with the feature is doing what we want to, and have, also strategies in place for turning it off. So if it doesn't work, if it's, taxing our systems, then we can turn it off. And Tanya said it too, is like having those relationships in place with stakeholders so that they trust you. So you're reporting back to them, and all the teams that are involved are engaged. So they're watching those systems. They're making sure that we're not overtaxing or we haven't overpromised. So having all of those relationships is really important.
One other thing, I'm going to go off script, people here, but I think one of the fallacies is inaction is the least risky thing you can do. And I think in the world of digital, staying stagnant is actually more risky than some of these other pilot areas. And I think that is so important for organizations to understand today.
Amen. Lonnie, thank you for saying that. And that was going to be similar to my comment. You had made the comment about the 3-year roadmap and let's hope everything works out. Believe it or not, we are still seeing requests for that. And when we talk to our clients, we very much are saying, no, it really needs to be test and learn. We really need to do proofs of concept. We really need to do pilots, because not only do you not know how your organization might need to shift, but customer expectations will shift. So we need to keep on top of that, right? Kind of shifting gears again a little bit, Liz and Tanya, we talked a little bit about new teams and developing our teams, but what's the number one question your growing team members ask you, and how do you answer it? Liz, let's start with you.
Sure. So one of the things that my employees want to know and understand is really what they do on a day-to-day basis, and how is it meaningful, and how does it contribute to the broader company, but also how is our company supporting more globally the global climate change and things like that. And so I typically answer that in a couple of different ways. One, I try to help my team members understand what our company is doing to support important issues in the world, and especially with climate change. So, for example, I share with my teams how Caterpillar is helping our customers transition to more energy efficient products, and how we're investing in, doing a lot of research and development in the future and to zero emission goals and all electric fleets and things that our customers are really wanting. I make sure that my employees understand those things and can relate to them and understand that the company they work for is helping the world. And then second, I talk to my team about how individually what they do on a day-to-day basis is helping our customers more directly. So as I have developers, I want to make sure that when they're working on, their e-commerce development, that they're seeing that the features that they're developing are helping our customers be more efficient. Maybe they're helping with the checkout flow, or helping introducing new features that would allow our customers to do self-service options to service their equipment. But these things that they can then tie back to how what they do on a day-to-day basis has that broader impact is really powerful. And then also, just as employees themselves, they have these basic needs of recognition and reward, and not that that's done just on an annual basis, but that we are recognizing our team members for their individual contribution, and that demonstrating that they're making a difference. And I think that helps to ensure that they understand how their work is valued, and then how their work impacts the broader perspective.
That's great. If I can ask, do you have an example of something that you do on a daily basis, monthly basis, for some of that recognition and reward outside of the annual cycle?
Yeah, sure. So definitely with our larger projects and things like that, we are empowered to give, opportunities for either cash awards or, or just talk about their achievements in a division meeting, I try to meet with my employees on every couple weeks to just give them an update on what's going on and incorporate that recognition as part of that so that they understand that what they're doing, that I recognize it, but then also the rest of the leadership team recognizes it as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. Tanya, what about you?
So, Liz, spot on. I get the same question, how are we impacting? How does my work impact? The other question I get a lot from the team is, how can I help? We have an amazing team, so anytime we hit barriers, it's how can I help? But today I'm really going to focus on where I primarily focus, which is on people. And as we have leadership roles become available, trying to promote from within whenever possible. Mm-hmm. I love to see potential and passion in people and bring them to places that they don't even know they can go, right? So this question is very near and dear to my heart. The question that I usually get is, how do I know if I'm successful in meeting expectations, right? So when you bring people into leadership positions that they haven't been in before, maybe not at that capacity with that large of scope, they start to second guess themselves, right? And so my first response is, we are in this together. I'm here for you. Look to those that you admire and emulate what you see. Also look to those that you may feel are not meeting expectations and be aware when you're exhibiting that same behavior, right? So you can learn just as much from those that you admire as you can from those that you don't necessarily think so. Ask for feedback if you're unsure. Do it often, right? You'd be amazed how often people are willing to give feedback. And then, every moment is a learning moment. The thing that I personally do is make sure that I provide feedback in real time when it happens. So coming out of a meeting, taking that extra 5 minutes to be late for the next meeting, to pick up the phone and say, hey, this is where you rocked it. And think about this next time, as you go in, remember who your audience is, or, whatever. And that real-time feedback in that moment goes so far. Really how you're successful is when you have the respect of your peers and the backing of your people. So not only your peers, but your colleagues and your business partners. And, for those leaders out there, when you marry passion with potential, you really can't go wrong.
I love that. And feedback, both Liz and Tanya, you mentioned feedback as being so important. And I think, just speaking for myself, there's a connotation of feedback being punitive. And I think as leaders, we can change that connotation to say, no, feedback is feedback. It's for you to grow. It's actually a very positive thing. And then model how to give feedback to others. Because I think, Tanya, you're right. People will give feedback, but usually not unsolicited.
Well, and the key thing, too, is to get that positive feedback as well as those coaching moments, because that's what builds confidence, and that's what builds good leaders, and that's what builds people, whether you're a leader or not. You have to give the positive when you see it just as often as you have those coaching moments, if not more.
Yeah, definitely. Very much related, and this is my favorite question today because I think it's valuable no matter where you are in your professional journey. And I mean, if time allows, I'd love to have everybody answer this, but Nina and Lonnie, we'll start with you. As your career as a woman in digital has progressed, can you reflect on any advice that you are really glad you followed or really glad you didn't follow? Nina, let's start with you.
Sure. So when I started my career, early on, I made sure to seek out a lot of advice, maybe building on what Tanya said, just analyzing and looking at what could I do to throughout my career to become a leader. And it was quite interesting now in hindsight and looking back. One piece of advice that I got is to really focus on my career path, really make sure that whatever I do matches where I want to go. So it was more of a straight, linear approach, as well as some of the feedback that I get. Well, you want to set your career goal based on where you want to go, of course, but make sure you don't forget about the opportunities that might not immediately look that they're a good fit, but that might give you additional valuable experience that you might need down the road to become a leader as well. So in hindsight, from my perspective, I'm really glad that I took the latter a lot more into consideration and really made use of good opportunities as they arose, even if they didn't seem to fit 100%. So for me personally, when I started my career, I started in law. I worked for the German Parliament and the EU Commission, so something totally different. I was then able to, because I wanted to change my perspective a little bit, I got an MBA in marketing, and after that, I was able to work in product marketing for an automotive OEM. So something totally different than what I'm doing right now. Sure, I'm responsible for home chargers that is a critical piece of equipment for electric vehicle owners. But really, why I'm describing this all is I would like to encourage everybody, especially young women in digital. You never know where your career takes you. Make sure you use those opportunities and really get this additional experience that you might immediately not know how valuable it becomes down the road. So your career does not have to be a straight line, in essence.
I love that. I think that a lot of women entering digital today really only see one career path, and that's unfortunately a lot of how organizations are structured today. But having that latitude and freedom to move around, I think, is great advice. Lonnie, what about you?
Yeah, I think I want to touch on this area around advice, bouncing off of something, Kim, you said about feedback, because advice is in some ways sort of feedback. And I would say the area I think I want to share is around feedback around this wonderful area called executive presence. And throughout my career, I've gotten sort of this thing that started off being very nebulous, which is, hey, like executive presence. And I'll tell you, I've gone through the whole, power speaking and top dogs and all that, trying to figure out what this thing was that people were calling executive presence. And it's, for me, a reflection on both feedback as well as executive presence. First of all, I've gone to a place where now looking at feedback, I have come to the realization that there isn't good feedback or bad feedback from the person that's giving it. It's how I, as a person, take that feedback and try to make the best use of it as possible. And the better that I become at that, the more valuable that feedback can be to me, whether that person giving it was a good feedback giver or not. And executive presence is an example of this, and I'll tell you why. Earlier in my career, when I heard executive presence, I thought it was, okay, I had to dress a certain way. Like, did I have to be in a blue suit? Did I have to cut my hair a certain way? Did I need to speak in a certain way? And it was hard, I would say, as a woman, because a lot of the people I saw as leaders didn't look like me and didn't sort of behave like me. And so I tried for the longest time to figure out what this executive presence thing was. And later on in my career, the same feedback, I've come to this conclusion around executive presence. And I'm welcome other people's feedback from the panel. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, tell me whether you agree or disagree. But I think executive presence started off with me taking the feedback that I had to present myself in a certain way. Come to the conclusion that it actually has to do with something very different. It's first working on yourself to find what you stand for, what your values are, and what your purpose is. Why do you show up at work every day, irrespective of your title, irrespective of your point in the hierarchy of some fictitious corporate structure. Why do you come to work every day, and what are you inspired by, and what do you represent, and who do you intrinsically want to be? I think that takes time to figure out. But that is so important to executive presence because that authenticity cannot be faked. The second thing I learned about executive presence is it isn't about you. It's about how you make other people feel, right? And it's a work in progress. I'm not doing this perfectly, but it's about when you're in a room, how are you being aware of where everybody else is in this more than they thought that they could achieve. Okay, and this is something I think, Tanya, you brought up so wonderfully about giving advice and, that place where people achieve. And having the ability to be empathetic, that's a second part of executive presence. So those two things are what I've come to, and I'm sharing this for two reasons. One, in my ability over time to work on this thing called taking feedback and trying to make usefulness out of it. And two, because I've been on this journey around this thing called executive presence. So if some of you are getting that as your advice and you're taking all the power speaking and all those things, keep doing those. Those things are great. They'll make you stronger. But the thing that I think gives you executive presence so that you can be authentic and you can be comfortable and you can lead people because you are putting your full self out there comes from, I think, those two places. So that's what I kind of wanted to share with you, and I hope that's useful.
I see a lot of nodding heads. Does anyone else on the panel want to jump in?
I 1000% agree with you, Lonnie, that authenticity, and I call it knowing your audience. So as you're presenting ideas, it's different when you're working with different groups and collaborating. And you have to put yourself in the mind of the person that you're engaging with and what they care about, at what level they care about. So if you're speaking to an executive, it's a different conversation than if you're speaking to the person that's getting things done, right? So it's important to know your audience and ask good questions, exploratory questions, and listen just as much, if not more, than you speak, right? When you're truly listening and understanding where a person's coming from, the conversation goes so much more smoothly. You learn so much, and then you can address any of those items or collaborate in the right space. So for me, that executive presence, whatever it is showing up to be that support for that person, right? So receiving just as much as you're giving.
We've got some good follow-up questions on this point. I think it really struck a chord. I think one of the big questions is executive presence. How does remote work impact how you approach conversations? Does it change anything when we're remote versus in person? Lonnie?
Yeah.
I'll tell you something. If you ever met me in person, I'm 5'2". And so what's interesting is I found in this virtual world, I'm bigger on your screen than I am in person. So I've actually found it's different in the sense that you only have this amount of space, right? You can't use the rest of your body. And given that I was talking about neurobiology of emotions, you also don't have the physical presence where you have like your different other signals that you physically can give that are human. So you don't have those things. So I think that in the virtual world, you've got to be a lot more expressive from this point. And as much as possible, the camera is like right there, right? I know I'm getting super tactical with all of you out there, but it's right there. So I try to remember myself, even if I have notes or I have other things where I'm really looking at you, but it's on the screen, I try to take time to look into the camera because I know that's where you are and that's where you're looking at me. So those are kind of points I would say is that it's just being aware that it is this square that you have.
That's great advice. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll speak on that. So
Yeah.
I think the other thing, you have to be more intentional about your relationships and about back to the networking point, is that you're not going to run into people in the hallway as much or be able to stop by their office. So it's definitely a lot of meetings, but being intentional about those meetings and who you're meeting with, and even having those coffee meetings or other ones like that looking at your network, who your peers are, who are the influencers, kind of mapping that out, and making those connections to keep those relationships going virtually.
I think that's really important. And I think a lot of people, man, woman, however you identify, struggles a little bit with remote working on a daily basis and how to really drive those connections. And I think especially what we've seen is women entering the workforce in particular, not being able to go into the office. What advice would you give to them? And maybe it's easier for us because we've been in this environment and we understand, how to build some of these connections, but they're not around people and they're feeling a little lonely. And, what would you suggest? That can go to anyone.
Sure. Thank you, Laura. What I would encourage everybody to do, it's a little bit building on what Liz just said. Don't be afraid. You have to basically, make the first step. Don't be afraid to reach out to somebody and say, hey, do you have 15 minutes to have a coffee with me virtually? And ask those questions, because I also like what you said, Tanya. It's critical to really listen, to understand where everybody's coming from. And I think that's much more difficult. Lonnie, you were talking about, well, you have to plan the square. Problem is, how do you listen actively while you're on these remote meetings? That has become a lot more difficult as well, apart from just not being able to read somebody as well as if you were in the room. So I would encourage everybody, don't be afraid. It's critical, as Tanya said, to know your audience, to build those relationships, to be able to listen. So go out there. Everybody will make time, because we're all in the same boat right now. It's independent of the hierarchies. Everybody's trying to still stay in contact and build that bridge to others within the organization.
Lonnie said something earlier about, I think it was Lonnie, about people remember the way you make them feel. So that executive presence as you walk away when you feel. Especially in the workforce and remotely, you can't take yourself too seriously. When you reach out to people on chat, send a meme. Something that strikes you as funny that you think might resonate with that person. You can't be serious all of the time. You got to have a little fun together. And, my motto is, hey, give me a chance to work with some smart, funny people and count me in, right? That humor and that lightness helps, I think, as well. Whether that be on chat, most companies have chat. You don't have to pick up the phone because a lot of times people are in a meeting, right? So not starting with the phone, but starting with chats or finding that common thread, and then, picking with the phone, the coffee that Nina mentioned, and those kinds of things. It really goes a long way.
That's great.
The one-on-one virtual coffee. One-on-one virtual coffees. Yeah. Just do it, because people are actually grateful when you reach out. Like, oftentimes you think people are bothered by it or something, but I think most people are kind of see as a compliment that you value their thoughts enough to reach out and seek it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Laura, did you want to add anything else?
I was just going to say that, be intentional about getting to know your team and following up with things that you find out about them, and just consciously, I love that what you said, Tanya, about having fun with them, sending funny gifts and just, saying hello to them in the morning. Sometimes, you're not working in the office, so you're not having that where you walk by their cubicle or their office. And so being intentional about, just saying, hi, how are you doing today? And just being open. I try to keep office hours, which it's virtual, but online, where my employees know they can reach out to me during those times. I'm available for whatever they need. So being available, not just for professional, but also for personal, if they need to reach out to me. So, but I think being very intentional about it, and being open and available.
Yeah. On our Proficient side, when we have started working with clients, we're doing a lot more work around employee experience. So a lot of the things that I'm hearing today, I hate to put a label on it, but it really is all about, well, how do you improve your experience for your team so they actually can do the jobs you've asked them to do? And a lot of it comes or goes way beyond professional development. It's really getting to know them on a personal level and understand what motivates them and drives them. I think it's great advice. Related, we have a question from the audience about just career paths that you all have gone through. What was your greatest barrier that you faced achieving your position in this tech field, and how did you overcome it? I'll give you a second to think, but Lonnie, I'm going to start with you because I see you're being very thoughtful about it.
I think that the barrier I had to get away from is thinking that if I worked really, really hard, that people would notice and that one day they would anoint me to the next level or something. And it was almost this thing where I felt like, look, if I worked really hard, why do I need to occasionally petition for my value and what I felt like I need to be recognized for or get to a broader area of responsibility. And I would say it took me quite a long time before I got over myself. Okay. And I'm like, look, you may think like people know what you're working on all the time and how hard you work and everything else. People got their own lives. People have their own areas. And there are times when you do need to, now you need to balance it out. You all want to be known as a person who's always talking about how great they are, right? I mean, we all know folks like that and we don't want to be them, right? But there are times when after putting in the work and, driving things and getting to a point of being able to have a serious conversation with not only your manager, but your sponsors or others about where you want to go and the opportunity, and the direction you want to take things to, and how your contributions in a broader scope could also benefit the company. I think it's a serious conversation that you need to be able to have. And I'll say personally, earlier on in my career, and it's still not my favorite thing to do, I'll tell you.
Mm-hmm.
But early in my career, I had a real issue with being able to do that. And now I'm like, I've gone over it. When I'm ready, when I feel like, hey, I need that next opportunity or I need something, I will voice it. And by that time, I need to make sure that all my contributions and all the things and the impact I've had measures up to that.
That's great. Nina, any thoughts on this question from you?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I feel like overall, maybe recently I've been in that unique role that I was able to build something up from the ground. So there was already that attention, I would say, within the organization. But certainly to echo what Lonnie was just describing, I think it's often, I don't want to stereotype, but more often I think as women, we're more careful to ask for what we need in order to be successful, which could benefit the company. So I second what you were describing. Without constantly talking about your achievements, I think it's critical to say or to be able to summarize and ask for that support from your managers, from your sponsors, that this is the next place where you want to go within the field and the organization, and be able to highlight and explain how this also creates a benefit to the organization. Because a lot of times if it's just focused around you, it's tougher to communicate. But if you're prepared, if you can illustrate and describe how this next level benefits the company, either from a strategic perspective or from immediately from a revenue perspective, those points are critical. So do your homework, but don't be afraid to speak up and share your goals specifically.
Right. Liz, any thoughts from you on this topic?
Yeah, so I think throughout my career as I became a leader and then became a leader of leaders, I think that transition is always somewhat challenging is you start to realize that what got you to where you were isn't what makes you, those skills aren't necessarily what makes you successful as a leader or a leader of leaders. So you start to realize that um, you're no longer that individual contributor, and what you need to do is support your teams and motivate your teams to do the challenging work that you used to do. And it's interesting that I've been going through this experience and trying to understand what are those things that I can do to help my team and to motivate them to achieve these very, very challenging goals. And so I've just been reflecting a lot on that throughout my career, is how that mind shift has had to change and how the skills I apply in my day-to-day job has changed as I've become, the next level leader.
That's really important. Is it the Peter principle that says you rise to the level of your incompetence? Like nobody wants that. Laura or Tanya, any thoughts on this question?
I think one of the things that's really important that people forget is that you need to always have your second in mind. And what I mean by, and groom them. And what I mean by that is a lot of people get stuck because they're irreplaceable, right? And so if you're grooming the next person to take your job, right, that frees you up to elevate, right? And so many people forget that. They think I'm the only person that can do this, but then they want to go to the next level, but there's nobody to take their space, right? So as you always groom, and it took me a while to figure that out. I'm still figuring it out. It's a journey, not a destination, right? But always be thinking about who you want to groom so that you can move.
That's fantastic.
Not a threat, it's a good opportunity.
Right.
Yep.
Laura, any thoughts from you on this final question?
I tend to be really comfortable in my roles and get too comfortable. And I think that's probably been what I would say is the biggest obstacle for my career, is just being too comfortable and not willing to take the risk. So I've been very fortunate that people have, found me and groomed me for those roles. And then when I get that opportunity and I feel that uncomfortableness, I have taken it and been so happy to have done that. And so I think looking back, I just say, not just get comfortable with you are, but be willing, looking for that next opportunity. And if you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable about it, that's a stretch for you, that's not necessarily, a warning, is go for it, is just be willing to get out of your comfort zone and take those challenging roles as they are available.
Laura, that is so important. On International Women's Day, women tend to be safe. They only go for positions where I know I can rock this. I know I can do this. A lot of women are too hesitant to take an opportunity where they know that they may not quite be there yet, but they have the potential to be there. Whereas men, they go do, right? They're not afraid. They're not scared. They take those leaps, those risks. And so we as women have to be very intentional to take those growth opportunities, to take those risks, and to be confident in ourselves that we can do that. So, a note for many, many women out there, take those risks, grow into things, and take them before you're quite ready, because you're never going to be 100% ready for anything. So do it.
That is great advice. And I think we'll end on that because it's very resonant. I want to thank all our panelists and attendees again. And just a reminder, your participation today has enabled us to make a donation to Girls Who Code. And we thank them too for all the great work that they're doing to develop tomorrow's women in digital leaders. Before we go, let's get the slides back up on here. We want to talk about 2 additional programs if you've liked the conversation today. I'd invite you to join Lonnie at the Adobe Summit on March 15th or 16th, 2 options for you, where she's talking about personalized commerce for digital business. Always really great content and topics that Lonnie talks about at Adobe Summit, so please join us there. And then one more shameless plug. Lynn mentioned I am a co-host of Proficience Podcast, What If, So What? And we have great conversations like this every other week that really talks about all the digital hype and breaks it down into the reality of what it takes to get down to business with them. So I invite you to give us a listen, and if you like us, reach out. And as we close today, if you didn't get to see our International Women's Day video, we're going to replay that for your enjoyment. But happy International Women's Day. And again, thank you to our panelists. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.